pleased to introduce our expert, Jack Lippman, founder and CEO of Elder Care Services. Welcome, Jack. It's a pleasure to have you join us today.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. And I turn it over to you.
Okay, so allow me to introduce myself. Jack Lipman. I've been in the business over 30 years. Um, for 18 years, I have been um, employed as a paralegal for three prestigious New York City elder care law firms. And for the last 12 of those years, I was their senior paralegal. 2011, I opened Elder Care Services, Inc., out of Queens, New York. But we do Medicaid applications for all the five boroughs and sometimes even outside of New York City, upstate, Orange counties, Rochester, all over. So New York Medicaid is covered by all 62 counties. So this morning we're going to go to discuss Medicaid eligibility, as I have it, Medicaid for anyone, not everyone, but anyone. Anyone who is willing to do their planning and make themselves financially eligible for Medicaid. And so we'll start with Medicaid eligibility. We're going to be discussing the difference between Medicare versus Medicaid. A lot of people make the mistake confusing the two. And then we'll discuss community Medicaid, and we'll end the discussion with nursing home Medicaid eligibility. So, very delicate. Medicare. Medicare is a health insurance offered to individuals who reached 65 and had worked for at least 40 quarters or 10 years. It is also given to disabled individuals 2 years after their disability is approved. So Medicare versus Medicaid. So as you'll notice, Medicare is a health insurance. Medicare and a supplement and Medicaid, these are the differences. You have health insurance. Medicare pays 80% of your bills. Your supplement insurance will pay the 20%, where Medicaid will pay 100%. For home care services, Medicare will pay 2 to 3 weeks and end. It's only a starter, usually to get the patient out of the hospital and get them set up at home, and hopefully either set up private home care services or apply for Medicaid. Supplement insurance doesn't pay for your home care services at all, where Medicaid is unlimited. Nursing home care, Medicare will pay up to 100 days. Supplement ends when Medicare ends, which is at the 100th day, if they get 100 days. Not everybody receives 100 days. Some only receive 50 days, 60 days. It all depends on the assessment done by Medicare doctor at the facility. They may say, you plateaued, you no longer are showing any rehabilitation, and therefore that insurance ends. So Medicare would end anytime within the 100 days. Where you look at the column for Medicaid, it's unlimited. So Medicare and long-term care insurance. A lot of people, especially 20, 30, 40 years ago purchased long-term care insurance. So although Medicare and a supplement health insurance may cover you 100% for doctors and hospitals, they nevertheless do not cover home care services or nursing home care. When it comes to home care services and nursing home care, they fall under the category of long-term care. If a person has long-term care insurance, it's important to know what kind of coverage they had purchased. Different policies cover different percentage of the cost per day. One example is some individuals have long-term care insurance that pays $100 per day. A lot of people will think $100 per day is a lot of money. At today's prices, $100 covers approximately 3 hours per day of home care services. Let's say this individual requires 10 hours per day. The uncovered portion will be 7 hours. 7 hours per day can cost approximately $210. Multiply 210 per day times 30 days, and the unpaid portion is approximately $6,300 per month. This individual has a choice either to pay $6,300 per month for the care or apply for Medicaid to cover the unpaid hours they need. What does this example say? That long-term care insurance is good, but you got to know what you are purchasing. Medicaid eligibility. There are two types of Medicaid applications. There is community Medicaid, which covers health insurance plus home care services. And then you have nursing home care, which is institutional services. What makes an applicant eligible for either community or nursing home Medicaid? Income and resources. That is basically what Medicaid looks at. Basically, Medicaid eligibility relies upon income and resources. So, what are the limits? For community Medicaid, the limits are basically resources for one person, $32,396 for 2025. Income maximum per month, $1,800. When we talk about a couple, they're entitled to $43,781 in the bank or any resources, and $2,433 for income. Home attendants offer the elderly the ability to stay home longer. Home attendants assist the elderly with all of their ADLs, activities of daily living, getting dressed, assisting with the showering, toileting, cleaning, cooking, and feeding. So before we go to nursing home Medicaid, a lot of people would say, well, what if I do not, or I have more than $32,000 in the bank? And what if my income exceeds $1,800? I therefore am not eligible. Well, if that person doesn't want to do any kind of planning, yes, you're absolutely correct. However, if a person transfers their assets either to a loved one or to a trust, they become financially eligible for community Medicaid the following month. If their income exceeds $1,800, I have a lot of clients that have an income of $8,000 to $10,000 a month. Medicaid wants the difference between $1,800 and the $10,000, whatever the income is. They want the difference. However, if the person is disabled and the classification for disabled person over 72 is any kind of ailment that has lasted for at least a year, could be arthritis. A person can have arthritis for 1 year and then they can classify for disability. Once they are classified disabled, they're able to use a pooled income trust. The pleasures of having a pooled income trust allows the applicant to deposit the surplus income, the amount of money that Medicaid wants, into the pooled income trust, and then send the pooled income trust bills to use the money in the pool trust to pay their expenses. So instead of giving it to Medicaid, they put it in the pool trust and are able to use it. We now go to the nursing home Medicaid. Eligibility for nursing home Medicaid is either for a married person or a single person. That's two different types of applications. So nursing home Medicaid allows the applicant to reside in an institution with 24/7 care, room and board, paid for by Medicaid. So the difference between a married person and a single person. A married person, the ill spouse, transfers all of their assets to the well spouse. The ill spouse becomes financially eligible the month after he or she transfers the assets to the well spouse. Yes, there is a 5-year look back, but it's only to see if there were any assets transferred outside of the couple. So if the ill spouse transferred monies to the well spouse during the last 5 years, it's called exempt transfers. But if the well spouse or the ill spouse transferred assets outside of the couple, that's considered a transfer of assets, and that will create a disqualification period. Single person has a problem. The single person doesn't have a spouse to transfer the assets to. And so the maximum that you can try to preserve is approximately 50%. It could be less, could be more, and that all depends on the nursing home charges and the income that the individual has. So to make it simplified, we'll use the 50% marker. And so the ill person will gift approximately 50% to a loved one or a trust. The other 50%, he lends it or she lends it through a promissory note. And that promissory note, the borrower will pay back the applicant in monthly increments until the promissory note is exhausted. When Medicaid sees this promissory note, they'll do the calculation and they will accept it, showing that the person saved 50% or thereabouts by doing this promissory note. And so at the end of the promissory note, Medicaid will pick up the case and thereby he or she protected 50% of their assets. Yes, there is a 5-year look back period, and hopefully they did not transfer any assets, because if they did, then it just means that you have to recalculate the promissory note and you lose some more money. But there is a way of protecting people's assets and getting them on Medicaid. One does not need to um, diminish all of their assets, as nursing homes say, or a lot of social workers mislead uh, applicants by telling them you have excess resources you need to spend down until you reach the Medicaid level. There are many ways of protecting the assets, the homes, and the income, and still enjoy the pleasures of having Medicaid pay your bills. So nursing home Medicaid limits are the same, $32,396 in resources. However, the income is down to $50 a month because room and board is paid for by Medicaid. The funny part is that the $50 is to cover haircuts, though for those who have hair, and cutting of the nails. So when we look at one person, this is the amount, and then you would say, what happened to a couple? Well, Medicaid applications for nursing home are individual. So there are no couples. If if both husband and wife require nursing home care, each has to file a separate application. And so if they had assets, all of a sudden they're split in half. Each one is in possession of 50% of the assets, and each one has to file their own Medicaid application. And that's why it's only one person. You don't see the couple over here. This brings us to the end. I hope it was a quick and painless way of understanding Medicaid eligibility, both for community Medicaid and nursing home Medicaid. So if there are any questions, we'll be glad to answer. Thank you very much.
My question would be, does this apply only in New York State, or say if you moved or you live in a different state?
Good
Um,
question. So
mhm.
every state has its own Medicaid program. The fact that you have Medicaid in New York does not automatically give you Medicaid anywhere else. You have to file a new application with that state. Likelihood is that you're going to be accepted, but one never knows. So each state has its own requirements. And from what I understand, New York and California are the most generous states of all. You have a state like Florida where there's no state tax, and they have the poorest Medicaid program.
And you were talking about before about promissory note. Can you explain further what a promissory note is and what it does, how it works?
Of course. So a promissory note is it's like somebody borrowing money from a bank or lending, but it's turned inside out, meaning that all of a sudden the applicant is lending money. Applicant is the bank, and they are lending uh, most likely family members the money. There is a promissory note, which is an agreement that both parties sign that they have received X amount of dollars, and they will be receiving a monthly payback with interest. And once it's all paid up, then Medicaid will pick up the case. So basically, it is a loan. It's just like a bank loan, except that in this case, the applicant is the bank lending somebody money and getting it back.
Okay. We have a question. Can you do a promissory note if you have to sell your co-op first to pay the nursing home?
So you don't need to sell the co-op and pay the nursing home. You need to sell the co-op in order to protect the assets that the co-op has. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the co-op is worth $200,000. So you file a Medicaid application once the co-op is sold. Also, people have to be aware that filing a nursing home Medicaid application, the person has to physically be in a nursing home. So if it's possible to sell it simultaneously as the person goes in. So sometimes people come in from the hospital, and as we said before, they get 100 days paid for by Medicare. During those 100 days, if that person sells the co-op, then that person, let's say the co-op is worth 200,000, all of a sudden has $200,000 in the bank. Now you do the Medicaid application. You transfer 50%, 100,000, and you do a promissory note for the other 100,000. And you file the application showing them what you did. You sold the co-op, it produced $200,000. You placed the 200,000 in the bank, and now you gifted out 100, and you loaned the other 100 through a promissory note.
Or could you transfer the asset of the condo, co-op to a loved one, like say if the co-op allows that?
So that's a good question. So
Yeah.
yeah, so let's just say that the co-op allows the transfer of the co-op from a to a cousin per se.
Mhm.
So that's fine. However, you got to get the fair market value of the co-op, and the the person that inherits this co-op has to surrender this money, because you need to show Medicaid the money, and you can't show them that it was transferred and you'll take a hit for it. They want to see the money. Once they see the money, then you can transfer the money. So
Mhm.
if it's a cousin, the cousin will produce $200,000. Immediately, he gets back or she gets back 100, and then immediately gets the other 100 through a promissory note, but they'll lose the second 100 because they have to pay it back in monthly increments.
Another question that came in is if you and your ill spouse jointly own shares to a co-op, would Medicaid count the full value of the co-op or just half of the value since it is jointly owned?
Okay, so jointly owned properties, um, and only one person enters the nursing home, you would have to look at the share certificate. If the share certificate indicates joint with the right of survivorship, that automatically means that once the applicant passes away by operation of law, that co-op is transferred automatically to the survivor. So the only issue over here is if you can determine that the applicant will pass away before the well spouse. If that happens, that's the ideal thing. So automatically it'll pass to the well spouse. However, if the well spouse passes away before the applicant in the nursing home, then the applicant inherited the complete co-op. And then that applicant would have to remove themselves from Medicaid and do another planning and do another application with a promissory note.
Another question, Jack, do you see changes in this application process with the many federal changes?
So we noticed that in 2020, they passed a new rule that they wanted community Medicaid applications to submit 2.5 years of look back. That means to see if there were any transfers in the last 2.5 years. However, that law was never implemented. Maybe one day it will come into effect. They passed it, they just didn't implement it into the Medicaid program. As far as any other issues with Medicaid, there is none that has been out there. However, they are very aggressively looking for paybacks. Um, People who are receiving fraudulent Medicaid, they're looking for them. They're looking to clean up the system to help the elderly get Medicaid. So, as far as the new rules that people are worried about, um, they're not out there. There's no talk at the moment of getting rid of Medicaid. It's going to be almost impossible to do that. Perfecting it, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But there's nothing written or threatening at the moment, not that I know.
Okay, another question. So you don't have to pay for 100 days in the nursing home while applying for Medicaid slash preparing for promissory note. I heard there was sometimes 6 months, but not sure. Intent to return? Question mark.
Yes, yes, very good. So there's a program for Medicaid that you have people that go to a nursing home for rehabilitation, and rehabilitation was not enough. They needed more care. And so they would stay in the nursing home for, let's say, an additional 6 months, and then they would go home, remarkably. Now, if they had sold their apartment or gave it up, meaning that they had a rented apartment and they gave it up because there's no income, they have to pay Medicaid. And upon their discharge, they have no place to go to. So there is that program that allows them to keep a certain amount of money during the first 6 months that they're in the nursing home. This means that upon discharge, if they are discharged within 6 months, they still have their apartment. They kept it because they were able to pay the maintenance or the rent or the loan on this co-op because they were able to keep uh, this additional money for the 6 months. And that is called intent to return home. So the intent to return home has to be signed by a doctor in the facility saying, yes, this person has an intent to come home. Almost everybody has an intent to come home. Whether they will or not is two different things, but they all have an intent to return home. So basically, you can do that for every client, correct?
We have another question. Do most nursing homes demand self-pay instead of accepting Medicaid right away?
Good. Uh, I would say that almost 95% of nursing homes in New York State accept Medicaid. There are some that don't, but I haven't uh, seen them yet. Uh, there is, I would say it's sort of like against the law to force somebody to pay privately first for a certain amount of time before they can apply for Medicaid. They may say, and if if the person promises that they're going to get Medicaid, but they don't have something to prove it, such as an attorney's letter or a letter from the institution that's going to provide the institution a copy of the Medicaid application and make promises, and then Um, it's highly unlikely. I haven't heard anything like that before, where they're forced to pay privately um, before, for a certain amount of time until they get Medicaid. Because Medicaid is retroactive. So, for instance, if a person enters the nursing home and they know that they will be given uh, 20 days only at the nursing facility, and you're going to file an application for that period, 21st day and above, the the applicant has 90 days to submit an application to get retroactive. And so nursing home can say to you that they want some money to be held in escrow in case you don't get Medicaid. Um, some have an entrance fee. Very few have sort of like an entrance fee. Um, Gerwin does in Long Island. Uh, so they have an entrance fee, and then you're forced to pay for it. But I haven't heard any institution saying that you need to pay privately for 2 years or 3 years before you are allowed to file a Medicaid application. If you're eligible, you can file it right away.
Another question, what are the requirements for Medicaid to cover home health aides? Will they also look at the applicant's assets?
Yes, yes, they're entitled to $32,000, 32,396, and they need to submit 1 month of bank statements to show that they are under that amount. Yes.
Yeah, going back to what you were just talking about, it sounds like you need to do a little research on what nursing homes accept Medicaid, even though most do. We know of some of the more luxurious nursing homes on the Upper East Side or in Westchester. I would think those may not, but you would have to do your research.
No, they all accept Medicaid.
Yeah, yeah.
The majority of them accept Medicaid, also because Medicaid is such a good payer.
Mhm. Ah, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so you have people that you'd be surprised. They go to the nursing home, they'll say, my father needs nursing home care and I'm going to pay for it privately. And they go, okay, pay us for the first 3 months. They pay the first 3 months and they disappear. They never get them back. And so then the nursing home has to get their legal department into action and do a guardianship and then get that person on Medicaid because they want to get paid. So when you talk about Medicaid, a lot of people think, oh, that's like very, embarrassing saying Medicaid. No, for the nursing home, they know they're going to get paid on a regular basis, you know.
So nursing homes might assist you then. Is that
Nursing
what you're
homes
saying?
are willing to do the Medicaid applications for free,
Wow.
providing that the person has no assets and can prove
Uh-huh.
for the last 5 years that they had no assets. Of course, once they see that the case is complicated, they will send that family to estate trust and wills attorneys, Medicaid professionals, somebody that can assist them because they don't want to take the responsibility of filing an application that is complicated.
So people need to anticipate turning over their assets 5 years in advance to a loved one in order to show they don't have
Well, that's a,
assets.
that's a very good point. And so
Yeah.
that's what these estate trust and wills attorneys are there, and they assist you with that, informing you what the outcome is. Point is, can that person live with themselves? Relinquishing the power is a very difficult situation. But there are a lot of people, what they do is they transfer their assets or assist their parents transferring their assets, placing them on community Medicaid, home care for 5 years, and then they can, admit them to a nursing facility because they can show that the last 5 years they had absolutely no money in the bank. So that is a way of avoiding that issue. Correct. Problem is that people don't actually, not a lot of people do that because they don't want to relinquish their power.
Another question came in. So you can still apply for Medicaid even if the nursing home knows you are selling the co-op to pay for the nursing home? This is if they haven't made it to the 5-year look back.
So there are a lot of issues with selling the co-op. Uh, so a person can file a Medicaid application owning the co-op. And some have to do that because they place the co-op on sale, but they're not selling it that quickly. May take 6 months, may take a year before they sell it. However, they don't want to pay the nursing home care for that amount of time. So they can file a nursing home application owning a co-op or a house that's worth less than $1 million and do Medicaid applications. Once they sell, they all of a sudden acquire a large sum of money. And at that point in time, they request Medicaid to drop them off the program, redo a new application, and now use a promissory note to protect half of that money. So there are a lot of avenues, and it depends on what you have and how you can dispose of it, how quickly you can dispose of it.
Thus far, we've been referring to assets as property, but would assets also include IRA or 401k or
So
other types of assets?
IRAs and 401ks pay out income. They pay, and you're required to take the required minimum distribution. If you're taking the required minimum distribution, Medicaid would count it as income. They will not count the resource. So let's say you have an IRA that's worth $1 million and it's throwing off $50,000 a year. They would look at the 50,000 as income, and the $1 million is safe because you're receiving the income. If you were not receiving the income, then the $1 million counts as a resource. So most 401ks, if they don't, you can activate them. IRAs, you activate them and start receiving the income if it's a large sum of money.
So they only count the taxable income from it, not the whole value of it.
Correct. Either
Okay.
income or the resource. Correct.
hmm Another question. If your ill spouse has a joint bank account with a well spouse, does Medicaid count the full value of the account or only half of the full value?
So generally speaking, they would count it as the applicant's account. However, if the joint owner can prove that half of that money belongs to them. For instance, you have an account where husband and wife deposit Social Security every month. Or you have two friends that lost their spouses and they decided to live together and use one account to make their life easy. Then, as long as you can show that both are depositing their income, then it's half and half. But generally speaking, they would see it as the applicants. And it's best then to split the account, to open a new account under uh, two different names, and that separates the two.
Do they look at your tax filing, whether you're filing jointly or separately?
So they look at your tax for the last 5 years in the nursing home environment.
Hmm.
The issue is not whether you're filing jointly um, or single. They're looking to see what investments you have. Most investments are listed in the tax returns, such as a person can live in New York but have a property in Florida and it's being rented and it generates income. And so that would alert Medicaid. They're looking to see what assets the person has.
Hmm. So not only IRAs, properties in other states, income generating properties, but also, um, I guess if people own equities, stocks, bonds, etc. Yeah.
Correct. But at the moment, they're not asking for tax returns on community Medicaid. So, but that doesn't mean that the person can own any property outside of New York State. The limit is
Mhm.
$32,000. So, if the person has a, a piece of property in Florida and it's worth $20,000, and they have two bank accounts that have a balance of $2,000 each, not a problem. They're still under the $32,000. But if they have a Florida property of $100,000 and they're applying and it's in their income tax and they think that, oh, well, I don't have to submit an income tax return, I won't inform Medicaid. So generally speaking, you are committing a fraudulent Medicaid because you're not revealing everything that you have, and you're trying to get Medicaid, not telling Medicaid all of your assets. And so it's best to be honest and protect it by going to a professional rather than uh, messing it up by yourself.
Mm. Another question. Not sure if this is a lawyer question. If you only used community Medicaid in your lifetime and your only asset, primary residence co-op, is in a revocable trust, is there Medicaid estate recovery in New York? I have heard different answers.
So revocable trust means that it still belongs to the person. And so if it lands in their estate, Medicaid is the first creditor of the estate, and they can get reimbursed for home care services. The question is whether the property is going to their estate. That's the key.
And can you go over again what the pooled income trust is? Because we were talking about revocable trust before. What's the
So the
difference?
difference between revocable trust, irrevocable trust, and a pooled income trust. So both irrevocable trust and revocable are created by an attorney and are documents uh, that need to be created by the legal aspects. Pooled income trust, you cannot go to an attorney. You cannot go to Chase Manhattan and say, I'd like to open up a pooled income trust. You must use a Medicaid approved pooled income trust. So Medicaid has approximately 20 pooled income trusts that they have approved. And you can only use one of those trusts. You cannot do it on your own. You have to join a pooled income trust that Medicaid approved. Once you join that pooled income trust, the money that you deposit into the pooled trust is for you to use, less their monthly fees. The only other issue need that the person needs to know is that they cannot use the pooled income trust as a savings account in the sense that once they pass away, whatever money is in the pooled trust is lost. It's lost to the charity group that the pooled income trust represents. So while the person is alive, they can use it as a savings account, meaning if you don't use all of your money 1 month, you don't lose it, it gets added on. And then you can use all of what's there for whatever purposes you have. Refurnishing your house, buying new appliances, reconstruction, or whatever. But once that person passes away, if they had saved $30,000, $50,000, all of that money is lost. So it's best to use the pool trust on a constant basis and clean it up before you use your money that you are entitled to keep.
Another question. So, if a co-op is either in a revocable or Medicaid trust, is it the same procedure you explained when in the nursing home? You have the 6 months for intent to return home and can apply for Medicaid slash then redo the Medicaid application once co-op is sold. This is if before the 5-year look back.
So if a property is in an irrevocable trust, it had already been transferred. And so now we're dealing with the amount of money that was transferred. And so let's just say that the co-op was worth $500,000 and you transferred it 2 years before you entered the nursing home. You now file a nursing home application. You're showing Medicaid you transferred $500,000. You need at that point in time to do a promissory note. It has been transferred. If you do the Medicaid application prior to the transfer, then you can ask for an intent to return home, and Medicaid would allow you to keep the property as long as it's $1 million or less, and provide Medicaid while you own the property. Then you sell it. Now you acquired the assets, you remove yourself from Medicaid, you do the planning, and you reapply for Medicaid.
So it sounds like Medicaid is not for only for the destitute, that anyone can apply if they know how.
So you remember my first slide. My first slide,
Do you want to?
Medicaid for anyone.
Hmm.
Anyone who is willing to do their estate planning, even though it's late in the day. So if one didn't do anything and then they have money and they need Medicaid, there's still a way to protect either all of it or a good portion of it.
Wow. Now, someone who asked the questions apologized. She lost service and said, with Medicaid trust in that example, you can't apply for Medicaid right away. You have to self-pay while getting the promissory note.
A little confusing, but when you apply, when you have a promissory note, because you only have a promissory note if you're applying for Medicaid.
Mhm.
Generally speaking, why would somebody lend money out if they don't apply for Medicaid? So if you're applying for Medicaid and you want to protect half of your assets or at least half of your assets, then you use a promissory note. You apply showing them that you have a promissory note. So let me just give you a more uh, bird's eye view of this. Let's say that you purchased or you have a promissory note that's going to pay for 3 years. It's going to pay you, the applicant. And the applicant uses that money plus their income to pay the nursing home. So you're filing a nursing home application today showing them that you have a promissory note, you have this income, and you're going to be paying the nursing home for the next 3 years via getting the income from the promissory note. Medicaid reviews this and sends you a notice of acceptance saying that 3 years from now, on such and such a date, you're approved for Medicaid. Okay, you don't do a promissory note, pay the nursing home, and then apply for Medicaid 3 years from now. Okay, because if you do that, when you file, you're going to have to go back 5 years. You're going to show them this money that has been transferred. And so you'll acquire a new penalty 3 years from now. So you need to apply for Medicaid at the date that the person enters the nursing home, showing Medicaid everything. Promissory note, the sale, if it's not sold, then you show them that you have a co-op. Everything has to be done on that point in time. Otherwise, you'll have to wait 5 years. You have to pay. Who pays 5 years? Let's say somebody has $20 million. Transfer the $20 million. You pay privately to the nursing home for 5 years. So you probably spend $1 million or $1.5 million. And then you apply for Medicaid because you show them 5 years of nothing, right? But if you have a promissory note, you need to submit the promissory note and showing Medicaid what you are doing for the next 3 years.
They can approve you 3 years in advance.
Yes, yes.